Most of Week 14 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday with a highly anticipated matchup between Bailey Zappi and Mitch Trubisky. Zappi looked really good in this game as he would go on to throw for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. Zeke Elliott had the best game of his Patriots career, and I was glad to see Juju Smith-Schuster get the rock and make some plays too, as he finished the game with 90 yards. New England had a combined 13 points in their previous 3 games, and getting a win does wonders for a fan base. They're still number 2 in the draft, and my only big takeaway for the Patriots is Bailey Zappi deserves to be on the team next year in what will probably be a backup role. Now, for the Steelers, guys, there's a lot of problems. They lost 2 games in 5 days to teams that were 8 games below 500, and both were at home. Mitch is awful, and what needs to be remembered about the Steelers is they haven't won a playoff game since 2016. I get the never had a losing record, but what does that matter? This team is wasting away one of the best defensive players of this generation's career in TJ Watt, and there doesn't look to be a good end in sight. I personally think Mike Tomlin has served his time as the Steelers head coach, and I am eager to see what this team does this offseason. And we are on to Sunday's action, and we are starting in the Big Easy with a game between the Panthers and Saints. This game was pretty bad for Carolina, and you don't accidentally lose by 22 points on the road, and Bryce finished this game just 13 of 36 for 137 yards with no touchdowns and no interceptions. And within this game, the Panthers receivers didn't do Bryce many favors, and I know the Panthers have lost a lot this year, obviously, but I really think this loss was the worst of them all. There's no takeaways for the Panthers other than to say this situation is not just standard old bad, but catastrophically bad with no end in sight. For the Saints, this was a solid team win and a must-win game for them, as they had dropped 3 in a row, and even as bad as the NFC South is, they couldn't afford to drop to 5-8 with any hope of winning the division and making the playoffs. At least they shouldn't have done that. I'm not overreacting to the Saints and saying they're going far because of this game, especially when they were outgained by 100 yards, but a win is a win after dropping the previous 3. And we will knock out the other NFC South game as we go to the Big A for Bucs-Falcons, and Rachaad White quietly ran for 100 yards for the second time in the last 3 games, and with the Bucs winning this game, we have 3 teams tied at 6-7 across the NFC South. This game was very Bucs-Falcons, and I mean that in the best way because Bucs-Falcons games are very entertaining and usually come down to the wire, and this was no different. I'm not moved by the Bucs winning this game, and the end of this game is a big representation as to why I'm not moved by the Bucs win. Tampa scored a go-ahead touchdown with 31 seconds left, and with only 30 seconds left, the Falcons managed to get the ball all the way down to the Bucs 3. Whether Tampa, Atlanta, or New Orleans ends up winning the division, I think the result will be the same for whoever is the winner, and I say that in parentheses, or quotations rather, because I think any of these teams are destined for a wild card exit, and not only that, but a loss of 9 or 10 spots per round in the 2024 draft. From the Madden simulation perspective of managing a franchise, I really don't want any of these teams to win the division because of the inevitable wild card exit. From the Big A to the Queen City to discuss Colts Bengals, and Cincy improved to 7-6 with a 20-point win over Indy. Jake Browning threw for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I think it's time we ask if Joe Burrow is a system quarterback. And all jokes aside, this was a critical win for Cincy because the playoffs are very much in reach for them, as their final 4 games are against Minnesota, Pittsburgh, KC, and Cleveland, and they technically are in the playoffs right now. Believe it or not, they can finish with 10 wins, and I was big on Chase Brown entering the year and was glad to see him have a big game in Week 14. For the Colts, as cliche as this sounds, it was one of those days. It obviously didn't help that Jonathan Taylor was out and that Indy rushed for just 46 yards as a team, but there was very little that went right for the Colts in this game. They missed a field goal and Gardner threw an interception in Cincy territory, and everyone has one of these games. I don't think Indy is a Super Bowl contender by any means, but I will say their final 4 games are winnable. And from recapping the Colts, we go to another AFC South team that didn't have a good day, and it's to North Jersey for Texans Jets. For everyone that was waiting for the opportunity to dunk on the Texans and for them to have an off day, well, this was it. But when you look at the Texans season, they have exceeded every expectation and then some. Losing both Tank Dell and Nico Collins in back-to-back weeks, along with Dalton Schultz being out for this game, Well, there's a reason CJ finished the day 10 of just 23 for 91 yards. They also had a few defensive injuries, including Will Anderson, and this was another what can go wrong, went wrong day. Now, for the Jets, I didn't think them putting up 30 points in a half was possible in the year 2023, but here we are. Zach Wilson looked great in the second half and threw for over 300 yards and had 2 touchdowns. Those stats were on the day, not just in the second half. And Garrett Wilson even had a 100-yard game for the first time since Week 8. If Zach Wilson can look like this, even if it's just one game a year, then imagine what Aaron will look like when healthy. And that's what Jets fans need to hang their hat on after this game. Now, down the Jersey Turnpike and eventually to I-95 to Charm City for Rams-Ravens, and this was one of the best games of not just the past week or two, but one of the best of the year. LA had won 3 in a row entering this game, and this was circled as a loss for the Rams, but this loss stinks because of how it happened. Matt Stafford threw for nearly 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Kyren Williams ran for over 100 yards too. The in-game management from Sean McVay was not good, and there has been other times where he hasn't been great in 2023. The Rams can win 3 of their final 4 games and get to the postseason. Puka is a great receiver, and they will be a pain in the ass to play if they make the playoffs. Now, for Baltimore, you would 100% rather win ugly than lose cute any day, and I thought the defense would play a little better off the bye, but the offense was clicking and had nearly 450 yards of offense in this game. Lamar threw for over 300 and had 3 touchdowns as well, and they had 2 receivers go for 80 or more yards and improved to 10-3. Their next 3 games are huge and will help determine a lot in the AFC playoff picture, and this was a must-win game for them, and shout out to Tylan Wallace. Out to Cleveland for Jags-Browns, and my gripe or takeaway with the Jags is what Jake Browning and Joe Flacco have done to this defense over the past 2 weeks, and thinking about what will happen in a month. My takeaway for the Jags isn't that they're done and to just lose out or anything drastic like that, but I do think this team has a clear ceiling. Not everyone can go to the Super Bowl or to the AFC Championship game, and that's fine. I think the 2023 Jags are a good team and not a great team, and again, there's 32 teams in the NFL. Not everyone is going to be great. This rebuild wasn't a one-year turnaround, and that's what needs to be remembered. For Cleveland, they improved to 8-5 with Joe Flacco throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game with not great weather, and in a game where the Browns put up 31 points. This was Cleveland's first win in nearly a month, and it could not have come at a better time. The final few games for Cleveland certainly aren't easy, but I don't look at any of these games and immediately count them out, which is an insane statement in itself with a team that's down to their 4th quarterback. Lions-Bears time, and it's time to have a discussion about the Detroit Lions. I'll start by saying I believe in the long-term vision of this team and trust Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, but I think this team is at maximum a divisional round exit. And since their Week 9 bye, they have allowed 149 points for an average of 29.8 per game. And we're at a point where Jared Goff's contract is going to be a big discussion, and I don't think you can give him $50 million per year or even $45 when there are clear holes on this roster that need to be addressed. This is going to be a big conversation this offseason in the Motor City, and I'm asking Lions fans this: what do you do this offseason? Now, for Chicago, DJ Moore is the receiver Bears fans have wanted for years, and they finally got him. And not only that, but Chicago is just 5-8 as a team, and they are a lot better than what 5-8 looks like on paper. They are 5-4 in their last 9 games, and the Bears are now 2-0 in their last 2 division games after starting out 0-9 in the Eberflus era. Maybe this is what they meant by taking the North and never giving it back, but the Bears are not the same old Bears. On to the 4 o'clock games, and Vikings-Raiders is up, and as some of you know, I am a Vikings fan, and yeah, this was certainly one of the games of the 2023 NFL season. The final score was 3-0, and it was as ugly as it sounds. There were several injuries on both sides, there was a lot of bad football being played, and as a Vikings fan, this may have been the worst game I've seen my team play since the Chicago game just 2 weeks ago. Some people will say this is loser talk, but I kinda hope my team doesn't make the playoffs because it would be very embarrassing to play the 49ers or the Eagles in the wild card round. This was as ugly of an NFL game as you'll see. For the Raiders, this is their 5th loss in their last 7 games, and they are now 5-8 on the year. And for their future, I really hope they continue to lose so they can get a quarterback in the 2024 draft. That's really the only takeaway I have from this game for them. This game was laughable at times, and if you watched it start to finish, then you know just how bad it was. Credit both defenses for not allowing a touchdown in this game. Across I-15 to LA for Broncos Chargers, and one of the biggest things from this game, and well, any game, is it's going to change your entire day when your quarterback leaves early. But that's not the lone takeaway, and this doesn't excuse how bad the Chargers looked in Week 14. The Broncos were underdogs entering this game, and I simply trust Sean Payton more than I do Brandon Staley, and I thought the Broncos would end up winning and improving to 7-6, which they did. LA is now 5-8, and I don't know what more you have to see from how pitiful this team looks week in and week out to fire your head coach. They look disinterested at times, and the message has clearly gone stale. Denver has won 4 of their last 5 games, and if they win in Detroit next week, which granted will be a tall task, then this team can win 11 games. I know this would have been insane to say when they were 0-3 just 11 weeks ago, but I truly think this team will win double-digit games. Also, I am very happy for wide receiver Courtland Sutton to have the bounce-back year he's had in 2023, as he hauled in his 10th touchdown of the year. Now to San Francisco for an NFC West clash, and despite Drew Lock starting for the Seahawks in this game, he wasn't the main reason they lost, and I didn't think he played bad considering the circumstances. You're not going to win many games when you give up 527 yards of opposing offense, and your safeties play bad on the field despite being one of the highest paid players at his position. Brock Purdy threw for over 350 yards, Christian McCaffrey had over 140 yards rushing, and Debo had over 140 yards receiving. Oh, but wait, there's more. Brandon Ayuk had 126 yards receiving, and George Kittle had a 40-plus yard touchdown. And when you factor all of that in, as crazy as this may sound, a 12-point loss with a backup quarterback was probably the best case scenario. I really think the 49ers can go to and win the Super Bowl when they play like this, and it's easy to see why. Seahawks fans and the 12th Mandalorian who always watches the videos and comments, what do you guys think you should do moving forward? I think they should try and get a quarterback of the future, and after that, invest pretty much every asset this offseason in the defense. Now for a highly anticipated game between the Bills and Chiefs, and it's not an exaggeration to say the Bills' season depended on this game. They will have a very tough matchup against Dallas next week, but this was the Bills' 3rd straight regular season win in Kansas City, and with how much these teams hate each other, there were a lot of Bills fans ecstatic to see Patrick be a little upset on the sideline at the conclusion of this game. And we've said this before with the Bills, but their record does not reflect who they are when they're playing true Buffalo Bills football. I know they beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, but this game wasn't close to the best that the Bills can play. But if you are a Bills fan, this win was extremely satisfying to say the least. Now, for Kansas City, there's a lot of concerns, and it involves one position. Kadarius Toney was offsides, which cost us one of the best plays we would have seen this year, and not only that, but they also lost to Detroit back in Week 1 due to a Kadarius Toney tipped pass that became a pick 6. I will never say a Patrick Mahomes-led team, especially with that defense they have, is done, but I don't like their chances of going into not 1, but perhaps 2 hostile environments with this lack of weaponry. Kansas City has one thing to do this offseason, and it's get better at receiver. That's it. They may get to the AFC Championship game this year, but I have a lot of concerns with the Kansas City Chiefs at this point in time. I hope you enjoyed the Week 14 recap, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 29% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel a ton. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.